Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name's Julie Armstrong, and I'm the Director of Product Management, responsible for Sentinel EMS, our monetization platform, Sentinel RMS, which is our flagship enforcement technology, and Sentinel Cloud. No, not good enough? Are you not? Is that better? I can speak up as if I don't have a mic. Again, I'm responsible for Sentinel EMS, our monetization platform, Sentinel RMS, our traditional flagship enforcement technology, and Sentinel Cloud, which is our connected licensing technology for usage-based and connected licensing that you've heard about quite a bit already, and you'll hear more about later on in the day. The topic of this particular presentation is operational efficiencies. I have with me Darim Rahmatallah, who is product manager for our for RMS, Sentinel RMS, and he'll talk to us about how to effect efficiencies from the activation standpoint, from the end customer standpoint, and I'll talk to you about efficiencies from the back office. There's a small enough group here that we can take questions as we go along, if you'd like. If it gets too lengthy, we'll pause and take questions at the end. But for now, let's just get rolling. So, why are back office efficiencies important? Well, there's obvious reasons, like there we go. Cost reductions. Obviously, the more efficient you are, the less costly it is for you to operate your business. There's also, of course, speed of delivery. If you're efficient, you can get your products to your customers and have them put to use much more quickly. And, of course, the advantages that come along with that is customer satisfaction, immediate delivery. You get the solutions into the hands of your customers as soon as possible. And then one thing that's probably a little less obvious is improved and speedy revenue recognition. So if you think about the fact that you deliver your products more quickly, they get into your customers' hands more quickly, they activate and begin to use them more quickly, you get the cash more quickly, and you can recognize the revenue more quickly. So these are all just some obvious reasons why adding efficiencies to your back office are going to help your business. So let's look at an example, a real-life example that has nothing to do with software. We've all paid tolls. Remember the good old days when you would drive up to the toll taker and you would hand them, you'd wait in line, first of all, because the guy in front of you didn't have his cash ready. And then, once you got to the toll taker, you'd hand them the cash. They'd hand you the change. And then they'd raise the arm so that you could, the gate so that you could pass. No automation there, all a manual process. Then, do we all recognize these? The toll baskets, right? This was supposed to help things quite a bit. So you could throw your coins into the toll basket, it would automatically count it, and the arm would go up and let you pass through right away. So from a back office standpoint, what was happening here? Well, the basket or the machine was counting the coins that you threw in the basket, and then raising the lever of the gate to allow you through. So that helped. Now, there's some question about whether that really made things more efficient or not, but that was the theory involved. Then, the transponder, the easy pass. You sign up for an account, you tell them what your credit card number is, or you pre-fund this account, and you get this transponder and you stick it on your windshield, and you can drive through the tolls at a slower pace, but you can drive through the tolls so you don't have to bring any cash out. You don't have to have any interaction with the toll taker or the toll booth. The back office here is recognizing that your transponder and is processing the payments to your account. But of course, as a customer, you need to go in and establish your account and pre-fund or provide a credit card in advance in order for this to work. But now, we're even going further in terms of the automation process. Have anybody seen the open road tolls? You just drive through. You might not even have a transponder. Doesn't matter. They take a picture of your license plate, and they go to the DMV. The back office figures out, matches your license plate to the DMV, and they send you a bill. You don't even really know that you're passing through a toll. I actually rented a car in Boulder, Colorado, earlier, I guess it was last year, and I was so confused because I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to get arrested for driving through the toll because I didn't pay. And I didn't have a transponder or anything. No, it was on my credit card next month. Really good. So this is just an example of how, back office automation impacts both user experience and provides efficiencies in terms of collecting revenues and processing payments. Okay, so what does this have to do with licensing and how do you get there? So let's first talk about your business and talk about the different vantage points from which you might look at your business. You might have a product-centric view. Are you a product manager or an engineer? If you are, you might be looking at things from the product standpoint. You're delivering a product that you believe addresses some customer requirements. This is your first focus, building features. And then you think about, okay, here's how I want to deliver this to the customer. How do I license this? How do I license this product that I'm building? I maybe want to control features to monetize features. I may want to protect my IP, so I build that into the product. And of course, the next step to this is, okay, now that I've got my product and it's licensed and have a licensing technology built in to control these features, how do I deliver it? This is where the back office comes in. How do I make sure that I am connecting the order from the customer to the licensing back office to ensure that we can deliver not only the software, but the licenses that are required to run the software? So it's just one view of how I might look at my product development lifecycle. Then there's the operations-centric view. This is probably, looks a little messy, doesn't it? Yeah, it is indeed. So this is everything else that goes into, not just the product development side, but how am I going to sell my product? How am I going to market my product? How am I going to deliver it and support it? How am I going to ensure that my maintenance renewals process is in place? And all this comes first, and is something that I'm focused on as an operations person, aside from the product. Yeah, the product's there, and those developer guys, they'll make the product and they'll make it work. But I'm the one that has to deliver it, and I'm the one that's going to have to collect the revenue for it, right? And then there's the customer-centric view. So what does a customer care about? How do I order it? How does it get delivered to me? How do I get the license and put it into place so that I can actually make use of this solution? Usability comes into play there too. None of these are wrong. All of these are just different viewpoints. And all of them are important in the final delivery of your solution. So I attribute this to David Wright. I love this slide because it really gives a representation of just how much and how many different stakeholders are involved in the licensing entitlement process for your product delivery. So if you think of new product introduction and the product lifecycle and the licensing lifecycle as many stages, the new product introduction piece is really a very small piece. It is the first, it's the product development of the offer and the engineering of the solution, but there's all these other stages in the licensing lifecycle that have to take place, and there's different constituents that care about those different stages. So you think about how you're going to sell it, like I mentioned before, the quoting process, how you're going to fulfill it, how you're going to support it, and even things like maintenance renewals, as I mentioned before, and then end of life eventually. Now what this chart represents, I know it's very small, is on the left-hand side are all the potential stakeholders involved in this overall licensing lifecycle process. There's, I won't read them all to you, but there's people, there's your IT organization, your operations, your finance, your sales, your marketing, your engineering, your manufacturing, all are involved and have an interest at different points in this process and are important stakeholders in how you deliver on this solution. And you can see there's a lot of X's there. So there's a lot of organizations and stakeholders that have an interest and influence on your overall licensing process, even if they know nothing about licensing at all. Through each stage, I mean, your organization might not have all of these constituents, but my guess is you have a major percentage of them. So what are some of the concerns? Well, order to cash. We had a little bit of a conversation about that earlier. How do you automate the process of delivery of not only the product, but of the license so that you can recognize revenue and get the cash in hand? How do you ensure that your renewal process is in place and isn't disjointed from your overall operations processes? And from an entitlement management standpoint, how do you make sure your sales organization understands what your customers have, what they've used, what they haven't used, whether there's a renewal coming due? All of these elements are important to them in the sales process and in ensuring you're getting the most value out of the product and the solution that you're delivering. How do you get your customers visibility into what they've purchased from you, what they have visibility into, what they have used, what they haven't used, and what they need to think about in terms of future, in terms of purchasing additional support, additional licenses, even as things change over time. Customer experience is obviously important as well. How do you ensure that your licensing process isn't going to be a burden to your customers? And you make sure that they have a good experience. In fact, almost an invisible experience, like that toll road, that open toll road. Licensing is just something that happens behind the scenes and it's not obvious to the customer, and they take advantage of your solutions without any negative impact. So making it easy, making it reliable. Your IT organization is going to be concerned about how your entitlement and licensing system fits into the IT landscape. You know, what are the integration points that are needed with your ERP, with your CRM, with your support system? All of these elements have to be considered. From an operations standpoint, I think this is one of the biggest deals. I think there's a few people in the room that would attest to this. How do you map your licensed products to the product SKUs that are in your ERP system? How do you make sure that that happens in an efficient and practical way? How do you migrate data? Maybe data from your product master, maybe data from existing licensing systems that are that you have for legacy products. And then what about new product introduction, and how do we introduce new products into this scheme without disrupting your existing and legacy solutions? So, you know, a strong connection between systems that generate and manage the software licensing entitlements and your back office is pretty important, and can provide actually some valuable insights to you and your customers in terms of where they are in the life cycle of a solution. Without connecting these systems, you really have very manual processes in order to achieve what you need to with licensing. So in this case, let's just look at a very manual process. I'm sure that you're not all doing everything manually in your organizations today, but I have a hunch that some of you have at least some of these steps are manual within your organization. So let's say the order entry process. So somebody calls customer service, they enter the order into your ERP or your order management system, and then somehow you have to make sure that the customer is then told what to do next. So your customer service person perhaps sends an email confirming to the customer, your order's been placed and here's your next steps, this is what you need to do. Then the end customer needs to provide details on whatever's being requested in order to produce the license, your fingerprint, your locking ID, and sends that to customer service through email, perhaps. And your customer service person then has to take that and say, okay, I'm going to generate the keys. Maybe those keys your key generation technologies are manual. Maybe you've got a CPU under your desk that you have to use to produce a key. Maybe some are actually licensed technologies that you need to, that are components of your solution, that are actually produced by external partners, and you might need to reach out to an external partner to get a key for that particular component. Depending on the order, you might have multiple licensing technologies involved, and your customer service person is going to go to all these particular licensing technologies to produce the keys that are needed, and then send them back via email to your customer. Then your customer has to take those keys and apply them according to rules, perhaps different rules to their solution to enable the software. Not a great experience overall. Now, I'm sure, as I said, some of you have automated some pieces of this, but how many of you see at least some elements of this in your organization where you have some manual processes taking place? Probably a fair number of you. All right. So what does it mean, essentially, in terms of experience? Well, obviously, there's a poor customer experience here. They have to wait. They place their order. They have to wait to get the acknowledgement. They have to provide in email to your customer service organization. They have to wait for the keys to be produced. It's not the best of experiences. You have some limitations in a manual process to being how flexible you can be in your offering to your customers. So the manual process between your ERP and your license generation is one that restricts you in terms of being able to offer a combination of features in a variety of ways, because you have manual processes that you have to deal with, and engineering changes that may need to be made in order to take advantage of offering different sets of features. And of course, your support and your customer service experience, the cost of having those individuals manually producing keys, taking calls from customers, taking emails from customers, and producing the keys offline. A lot of manual processes also introduce, of course, potential errors that then need to be corrected. The customer calls you and says, my key isn't working, and you have to go through this whole process again. A lot of manual intervention there. And for you, as the ISV, especially if you are dealing with multiple products that are being serviced by different licensing technologies and systems, you don't have good visibility overall to what's happening in your customer base. You have different systems that are maintaining your licensing information and your entitlement information across different products and across different product lines that aren't necessarily visible to you through a single view. So overall, the process seems like it can be improved quite a bit. So let's look at what the impacts of this are. This is kind of just a recap of the impacts of having a very manual process. So what can we do about this? How can we transform this? Well, we would suggest that you, in introducing Sentinel EMS as your monetization platform and integrating EMS with your back office systems, that you can really add to efficiencies all across the board. And so maybe your infrastructure is a bit different, but in this particular case, we're demonstrating that the order entry process can be made more efficient. Once an order is placed, whether you do it with an e-commerce or through an order management system, there is the opportunity to add to efficiencies by using integration points to automatically populate EMS with your entitlement information upon order entry. And automate the process of communicating with your customer through email to either come to a website or potentially even have that activation process happen from within your application itself. And Darim will talk about that a little bit more later. So in this case, the customer can come to a website for Sentinel EMS, the customer portal. They can provide, either through automation or or independently their locking information, and the customer portal will contact EMS with all the locking information that's important, return all of the keys. It centralizes all the key generation, even for your manual key generation processes. We have a capability to do that as well. But the interfacing EMS to call all your key generators independently and return the keys, consolidate them, and produce a single experience rather than multiple experiences for your customer, even if there's multiple components in your product that are using different key technologies.
Question.
Yes?
Just to clarify, you have, say, two keys, and it'll actually, Sentinel will create one master key that supports that basically consolidates those two keys?
You can. It depends on your enforcement technology. But at a minimum, what you can do is make sure that both those keys are returned in the same transaction. So, you know, obviously, whatever technology is built into your product will define whether it's a replacement key that contains all of the information or not. For instance, with Sentinel RMS, you could get a single key that applies to all of the features that have been ordered. But in some cases, you might have different technologies and require different keys and different processes for installing those keys as well. Any other questions? So what do you need to do from an integration standpoint to affect this kind of automation? Well, if you look at EMS as the hub, there's a lot of different integration points. From your ERP or your order management system, you want to use web services to generate entitlements based on orders or contracts. And that would be populated to EMS, and EMS would in turn return some kind of an identifier to your ERP system to backtrack to say this has been fulfilled, it's in the system, and depending on your revenue recognition policies, that in and of itself may be sufficient to do your revenue recognition. I've had a couple of conversations with people in the last couple of days, depending on how aggressive or conservative your finance people are. There's different points where revenue recognition might happen. If you're using cloud licensing, Sentinel EMS can automatically provision those licenses to the cloud. So your end user doesn't even have to do an activation process at all. It automatically happens, automatically produced in the cloud, and there's no activation process at all. Once activation does take place or provisioning does take place, you may need or want an install base to be updated. Either the install base calling EMS to pull that information or pushing that information to the install base for contract information as well. Not just an install base, but maintenance contracts, for instance, at the activation point. So those of you who have solutions that have perhaps 1 year of free maintenance, you know, it might be a perpetual license, but 1 year of free maintenance, and you need to populate your contract space or your install base to reflect that an activation has taken place and that 1 year of maintenance has started. What about your CRM system? Well, your CRM might feed your customer and contact information into EMS. Often, that's generally provided through the order from your ERP, but it could be either way. Or updates might be provided from your CRM system, wherever your customer master exists. But also, EMS you might want to push the information from EMS on the activations that have taken place to your CRM system. Why do you want to do that? You want to do that because you don't want your sales force to necessarily have to use a new tool to have the visibility that we were talking about. You want them to use the tools that they have already. And so you want to push that information to Salesforce.com or to Microsoft Dynamics so that they have visibility into it from the tools that they use.
Just that, you propose routine some integration with Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics?
We do. We have a Salesforce connector actually and we can certainly do it through our professional services. You can do it yourself with our web services as well. I would suggest that this afternoon we're having breakout sessions, and if you come to the entitlement management table, we can talk to you about our connectors, one of which is Salesforce. Okay.
Julie, when you use the word push, does
Right, and in fact, we've had requests for web services that are that might push that as a part of an event that happens, a transaction event. So we today are using our connectors to do that process, but tomorrow we will be implementing web services to automate that process even further.
And can all usage that is gathered in the entitlement be pushed as well to Salesforce?
Right. So the typical scenario is you push not only entitlement information, but when an activation takes place or usage takes place, you push that information as well, or exchange that information, I should say. Might be pulled from Salesforce. It might be pushed from EMS. Okay. What else? Your support systems. So you don't want your support people to have to go into EMS to check whether somebody has what products they are entitled to and what maintenance contracts they have. You'd rather want their existing systems to call out and just validate. You get a call or a ticket from your support system. You want to just validate: is this customer entitled to maintenance? What product do they actually have installed? Call, say, get entitlement. Does it exist? Yes, great. I'll continue. And even software delivery, if you're talking about ESD, we had Akamai here this week. Same idea, where perhaps from a delivery standpoint, you would like to have the CDN that you're using to deliver the software to validate when somebody goes to the download, to validate, say, yes, that they're still entitled to this. It hasn't ended, and before you allow them to download. Frankly, I don't see a lot of people using that so much, but it has been requested. Because most people are using licensing to control access to the software, so that they would let you download it regardless. But some people want to control downloads to new versions or downloads to patches and things like that based on maintenance, and so this would be a mechanism for doing that as well. Okay, yes?
Question back to the pushing the time and activation information to the CRM.
Yeah?
For example, is that basically a replication of the entitlement details in two places? Basically,
I mean, essentially it is. It is you have a master. Typically, EMS would be your master of data, and you would replicate it.
so that's just to allow the sales organization to know what's going on.
Right.
Versus having to go to the license.
Right. You don't want, again, in an ideal world, your entitlement management system would have a handful of people that are actually using it directly. It's really acting as the life cycle. It's maintaining the life cycle of the entitlement and the activation process and pushing the source of the information. But you'd be using your own tools to grab that information. I wouldn't want to introduce a whole bunch of users to EMS just to see visibility into a particular customer account, for instance. I mean, you could. It's still an option, but theoretically, you want people to use the tools that they're used to using, right? So anyway, it really is a matter of fully integrating and integrating all these pieces. And you can do them one at a time, or you can do them as a part of a rollout process. But in a really efficient solution, you're touching all of these points. It's those constituencies that I mentioned on the left-hand side are being serviced by an integration with EMS. Now, what I want to do now is introduce Darim to talk about how you can improve efficiencies of the activation process using licensing technology in combination with your back office.
So this one is it?
Yep.
Okay. I tend to walk around when I present, so I'm going to try and stand still. But as Julie said, this is really talking about what happens at the end point between it's like you've made the movie, and how do you deliver that movie to the customers? You don't want to use a lousy old black and white projector to get that. You want to complete the process and make sure that the final delivery piece of getting those licenses to the customers is also benefiting from automation, benefiting from a significant streamlining of the process. So, what are the main drivers? We've talked about customer experience again. To date, I've never heard a customer turn around to me or to one of our customers, an end customer, say, you know what? Since you've added product activation, my life is better. Customers generally don't like licensing. They generally don't like activation. It gets in their way. So to automate this and create a seamless process, it just means that you're eliminating that burden, as we talked about before as well. Reliability is another big one. It's making sure that customers are far less likely to make a mistake, to put wrong fingerprints in, or to activate the wrong machine, and so on. And then transparency. This is really the kind of the licensing nirvana. Is a customer doesn't even know they're licensed. This is really the ultimate goal that people look for. The end customer has no idea that the software is even licensed, obviously, until they try and bypass or breach their licensing terms or get the bill. Right, exactly. This last point also is a critical one. I think we find that generally customers will hold back on being creative because they don't want to complicate the customer interaction with those licenses. They want to keep it very, very simple. So as soon as you automate this and you take away that burden and that complexity, it gives you more freedom to be more creative, come up with more complex structures to your licensing. Ultimately, this is what licensing is all about. It's about allowing you to be more creative with your pricing and your packaging. Right. Okay. So some examples of where this falls apart. Does anybody recognize the movie, by the way? Yeah. I love that movie. So, and maintaining our car theme, of course. So what can go wrong? Ultimately, as I mentioned, customers installing the wrong features. Most customers don't even know what a feature is. They shouldn't even be interacting with features. So they can, if you give them a manual process, they can be sticking features where they shouldn't be. They should be, putting them onto the wrong machines or the wrong hardware, and so on. Providing the wrong fingerprints or installing them onto the wrong computers. Oh, damn, I didn't mean to activate this machine. I was just trying out the process. So that license, then they've got to get a call in. They've got to speak back to their vendor and say, listen, I've activated the wrong machine, or I wrote down the wrong fingerprint. I need to somehow get this license back and relicense it. Cumbersome, troublesome processes. And then customers, okay, it sounds like a weird one. Customers can't use the software in the middle of the night. Well, your middle of the night might be the middle of their working day if they're in Osaka, or somewhere like that. So automation means that they don't have to be speaking to you to get the licenses. And getting a license means being able to use the software. And I've heard this one so many times. Licensing and tech support become one and the same. I've heard so many customers turn around to say, we get so many support calls. 70% of our support calls are due to licensing. 90% of our support calls are due to licensing. They're not licensing bugs. They're licensing mistakes, usually. It's the customers turn around and said, I've activated the wrong machine. Oh, I've done this, I've done that. It's not because the licensing technology is broken in some way. It's just because they've been given too much choice and they've made the wrong step somewhere along the process, and they've basically broken it. Automation gets rid of all of that. So I'll go over this one relatively quickly. This is just really the kind of the points, the integration points in the kind of the activation flow. Three main entities here. Sort of the order admin entity. This is the person or the process or the department or whatever that's taking and processing customer orders. Of course, on the right-hand side, we've got Sentinel EMS, the main management platform for the licensing. The most important piece at the bottom, the customer themselves. So the flow typically would be, the first step is that the product order gets placed through the order admin role, entity. That creates what we call a request for an entitlement. That entitlement gets delivered to the customer. When I say entitlement, this has so many names. People call it something different. Authorization code, product code, CD key, license authorization code, entitlement code. There's so many different names. It's ultimately, as a customer, it's your passport. It's your right now to have a license. It's saying, right, this is my license. I purchased the software. I'm ready to go. Once they've got all this information, the activation is actually very, very, very straightforward. They simply submit this, and I'm calling it activation data, because there's usually some kind of requirement associated to an activation. The most basic of examples of this is locking, is a fingerprint. They need to provide some kind of locking code, but it could be usernames, passwords, it could be anything. There's some kind of prerequisites to activate that license that they are required to submit. So they provide that information with the entitlement. The entitlement in EMS tells them everything that they need to know about what features and modules and everything else. The customer doesn't have to worry about any of this stuff. They simply receive back the license code, the license file. The license is the encrypted piece of information that enables the use of the software components. So the license is the technical entity, ultimately, that the software will use to run. This is, I love diagrams, so I've always put diagrams in my slides. This is kind of just a view of the overall picture, of how these licenses get fed out to customers and the mechanisms in place to get these licenses out to the customers. It's all APIs and web services. There's no need for any kind of customer interaction. You'll see two different scenarios here as well. You've got your individual seat licenses, and you've got corporate license networks. The flows and the pieces are exactly the same. The process is the same. There are APIs to generate fingerprints and generate locking codes. There's no need for people to be doing this. It's all done automatically and under the hood. Web services to send this information back to EMS. The fingerprints and entitlement IDs and et cetera. And then the same in coming back from EMS. Web services to receive those licenses back to the customer environment, and then APIs to install them and create license stores. It's all under the hood. It's all automatic. If you look at Microsoft are often the kings of this. You go up and you click activate on Windows, and all of this happens under the hood, and within seconds it goes, thank you, you have activated your product. Actually, it's all of this back and forth flow of information has taken place. You didn't know anything about it. It's really good. Okay. So the areas to focus on. Fingerprinting is one of the most important pieces here. Fingerprinting is often where this falls apart, because if you don't get the fingerprinting right, then it can be, the customer can get something which is too locked down, and if they undock the laptop, the licensing breaks, or it's something which is too loose, and it's outside of your comfort zone of actually how much freedom versus how much control do we want to give that customer. It's definitely there's a sliding scale here, and it all depends on your customer and the region, etc. But it's a very, very important piece to get right. It's something that you need to spend time thinking about, and of course, we've got the tools and the resources to completely help you there. The interaction between the application and the backend, as I said, use the web services, use the automation to get between the 2 points. Once those licenses are back, we've got APIs, we've got tools, and we've got services to get those licenses installed and completely managed. The customer doesn't have to touch these things at all. And lastly, I've only put this on one bullet, revoke and rehost. This often kind of scares people a little bit. Oh God, what about, I haven't even thought about revoking or rehosting of licenses. That's way too much complexity. It's exactly the same thing in reverse. It's exactly the same thing. You just undo what you did. It's actually very, very easy to revoke a license. You just do the thing, do what you did, but do it in reverse. Last slide.
I'm sorry, quick question.
Sure.
With respect to revocation and rehosting, what words do you use in EMS lingo or APIs or whatever for those API calls that undo that? Are you revoking entitlements? Are you disabling them? I think of those things kind of from the cloud side, but I just want to understand the lingo you use there. So if I look at APIs,
Right. From an on-premise licensing standpoint, we use the term revoke, but you don't revoke an entitlement, you revoke an activation. So you revoke an activation,
Yeah.
right?
And there's the concept, right, to recharge the entitlement.
Right. And
So-
the overall process involves a number of calls for an on-premise license where you actually do they revoke the activation, and then you recharge the entitlement so that those activation quantities are again available, and then you do another activation to produce the key or the license for the second machine. We've had a lot of requests for a consolidated web service to do kind of the whole rehost process, which we're looking at as well, so that it's not separate calls, and we think that that's probably the next step, something that we need to do.
If we go back to this slide here, this action, these two steps, step 4 and step 5, they can be repeated under one entitlement. You can have an entitlement that allows you to do this multiple times. So generally, that entitlement will start getting decremented each time you do this. So the revoke just simply re-increments that, ultimately, just to give you back those rights. Obviously, the licenses on the client end, over here, the license is basically nuked. It's been marked as blacklisted, et cetera. But, but on the back end side, it's just simply reinstated as an entitlement. Okay.
Actually, a question back to that.
Yeah.
So this implies a direct model. What would it look like with a tier in between, say, a reseller, distributor, and then reseller?
It's a good question. Good question. So it's actually similar. The only difference is that, let's say with EMS, if you know who you will obviously know who the reseller is. You may not know who the end customer is at the time that entitlement is generated. The reseller comes in, but we note the reseller or the channel partner on the entitlement. Then they have visibility to those entitlements, and they can later identify, either they can activate on behalf of the end customer and identify the end customer at the time of activation. The process is the same, essentially. Obviously, they can't do the automated option. What they would typically do if they wanted full automation is the reseller is going to forward that identifier. Where was that slide that had the identifier on it? The license authorization code to their end customer, and their end customer is then going to call these services from the application, provide that token, essentially, and those processes happen back and forth. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Right. And what it does is it gives your channel partners then have the opportunity to service their customers directly if they want, or your end customers can do self-service. But you always have that tracking of who the channel partner is, and you have visibility into how that entitlement got to the end customer in the first place, which is very helpful for marketing purposes and for a lot of other purposes to know who your channel partners are. We're also have the ability to track multiple partners on an entitlement. So, for instance, if you've got a distributor and then they sell to a reseller, so you can have all of those tracked on an entitlement and have full visibility into how it goes through the channel into the end customer.
Is that captured in EMS?
Yes.
So that's at so you're talking about being able to buy, if they want to buy one of the licenses and they did the amount.
Mm-hmm. Right. You're right. Well, there's two mechanisms. You can do what the more typical process is the creation of multiple entitlements, each of having an independent locking activation code or token. Right. So you say, I'm a reseller and I want to buy 10 of these and I want independent entitlements for each of them because they're going to go to different customers. That's one method. The other would be through splitting of an entitlement. We have that capability in the back end itself from an admin standpoint right now, and that is a roadmap item, which I'll talk about in the roadmap session, is to allow our actual channel partners to do that kind of splitting so that they can buy in bulk a single entitlement or 100, give 10 to somebody and 20 to somebody, as opposed to having to order the individual entitlements when they don't necessarily know what quantities are going to be, how the quantities are going to be split out. Right. Right now they do, and that's a roadmap item to allow them to do it themselves in the early 2015. Okay. This is a terminology thing. So we refer to the I refer to the license key as actually the license that enables the software, where the token is the EID, or entitlement ID. The token is what allows you to come back and say, I have the right to get this license. Okay? Yeah.
Okay. So the last point that I wanted to make on this is really we're talking about an on-premise, a normal kind of conventional or traditional view. This is really where the requirements for automation become much more important, because these connections are, they're on a sort of by demand basis rather than something which is always there. We've been talking a lot about cloud. We've been talking about it at this conference. We've been talking about it for a long time, within SafeNet, and talking about connected licensing. It's one of the most important subjects that I'm certainly talking about as well at the moment. With a cloud-connected deployment, you don't really have any of these kind of concerns. The concept of automation is inherent. You get automation automatically with a cloud-connected deployment. So as soon as you start incorporating cloud licensing with these environments, there's no sort of requirement to even think about the fingerprint generations and web services to pass licenses back and forth. The ultimate goal, as Julie mentioned, it's going through this. I don't remember what they're called. We certainly don't have these in the UK.
Open road toll.
Yeah. But, going through it, and it's like, was that a toll? I don't know. Was that a toll? I don't even know if that was a toll. Yeah. Ultimately, that's what it's about. It's the customer going, was that a license?
Until the bill arrives.
Yeah.
You get the bill.
Any other questions?
Maybe one other question with regards to the last slide, the one with
This one.
the one with the previous one. Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
We implemented Sentinel actually already.
Mhm.
And what we need here is the enablement of development licenses goes through our subscription billing system
Mhm.
first.
Yep.
The question is, do you think it makes more sense to do that this way, or to have an intermediate system in between the customer, self-serving on the web, etc., and something?
It depends very much on your business, and it depends very much on the way your application is deployed in the first place. I think in these scenarios, we have a lot of customers asking us how they can start benefiting from cloud capability with a more traditional type of deployment already, and that's generally where this specific view would be based upon, So,
I can give you a real example, which is Sentinel EMS 3.0. We use cloud licensing to enable it. So you develop, it's delivered on-premise. It's a traditional on-premise deployment, but we're using Sentinel Cloud licensing to control the features. In that scenario, even though it's a traditional on-premise scenario, we're still taking advantage of the cloud connectivity for it.
So Julie, using that example, so let me play that back. So you said EMS 3.0 uses Sentinel Cloud.
Yeah, it does. Yep.
So what do you, if I bought EMS on-premise,
Mm-hmm.
what do I get from you to hook that back to? Because I'm very curious
Right.
about that, comparing maybe to what we send our customers.
Yep.
So what does that interaction look like when I buy that? What's
Right.
the email say?
Right.
Do you get the EID?
You do. So essentially what happens is you get an email that says, come here to download your software, and you get a customer reference ID in that email. This is what you use during the installation process. So when you install EMS, it asks you for this customer reference ID. That's essentially, the equivalent of your EID. And that's what reaches back out to Sentinel Cloud to say, okay, do we have an entitlement for this person, and what features have been enabled for this deployment.
Just use the customer reference ID, get the entitlement sort of dynamically?
Yep.
Okay, so that sort of assumes that the customer maybe only has one entitlement, and you can find it?
Not necessarily, because it's the reference ID might be the same reference ID across different entitlements and across different products. So the customer, it's kind of your customer identifier essentially in the cloud, based on the application that's doing the call for the license, is looking for that customer reference ID and saying, oh, we're looking for an entitlement for EMS 3.0. So it's
We give our customer both things, and that's kind of why I was curious about this.
Yeah. It's nice because what it means is that in the future, so let's assume with that we add some capabilities or some features onto EMS that we want to monetize. What a concept. You as a customer who has EMS 3.0 could simply place an order for that add-on, and it automatically gets provisioned to the cloud, and it's automatically available to you on your implementation of EMS without having to do anything. No installation, no nothing. So it's a it's a really nice process. Same thing with subscription renewals. Extending the dates. There's no visibility. Yes, John.
So is that to say, and this is for the benefit of understanding the architecture too, right? That the product itself has a continuous phone home check back. Has this entitlement been updated?
That's a good.
It's an automated capability that's built in.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it depends on how you implement it. Okay, so the way that we've done it for EMS, we assume that there's a connection. It doesn't have to be a constant connection. That's actually in our control. We've said 90 days. As long as you connect every 90 days, you're okay. But that's something that's in your control to say, whether you want it to be a constant connection, whether you want to have the license maybe can be cached for a period of time, and you can define what that period of time is before they have to connect again. Or we even have, the ability to do completely disconnected licensing as well, obviously, because we do that already. Yep, yep.
If you want to track usage and not based on usage, and you need
Exactly. So there are limitations if you're going to be offline to what you can do with the usage data. So we're using Sentinel Cloud licensing right now in EMS really for packaging purposes. We are using the usage information, but it's secondary and it's not to control anything. In your case, you're using it to control and to monitor and to bill. Not to say we won't do that at some point eventually as well, but that's how we're using it today. Yes.
So you talked about EMS and the cloud. Where in this diagram comes the RMS, the enforcement piece?
It's here or directly in the workstations in the devices. So it's the
APIs.
Yep.
right
The runtimes
exactly.
or whatever.
It's APIs or services or servers that are running. So that it's basically the license. Whenever that license arrives, just basically a text file. With encrypted data inside it, it'll sit with the RMS runtime component, which will either be a server or it's an embedded library in the application.
Yes.
Further on that bottom right-hand corner, I've understood this correctly. It looks like two layers of license service. There's a Sentinel Cloud license service, and then there's an on-premise license server. Is it not really you're treating all of that as individual seat licenses now, going back to Sentinel Cloud, or is there
So,
layers?
yeah, it's a great question. So on the top example, this really is a license server in the cloud. These are interacting directly with the license service that's running in the cloud. In this sort of more on-prem environment, this is the kind of the regular interaction. In this case, the license server is going back up to the cloud to make sure if there's anything's changed. So the frequency of that could be minutes, hours, days, etc. But it's still responsible for distribution of licenses within that network. So generally, these guys don't have to even be connected. It's only this entity that needs to even be connected to the outside world. Does that's really the main difference. In the top example, they obviously have to be connected directly to the cloud to get the licensing authorizations in the first place.
Envision some sort of a, let's say, connected cache server on the front end, where then we somehow sneak it on the
Yep.
back end, or is there, you know what I'm saying? As far
Yep.
as maybe on this side of the firewall, we could use Sentinel Cloud to cache a bunch of container licenses, if you will, and then the customer would be there for 90 days and pull it into the network.
Right, right. When we have that today. Some level of isolated network support using Sentinel Cloud licensing is available today, and we're enhancing it as well. You'll see that in the roadmap discussion. So you're here for the afternoon? Yeah. So it's exactly what you said. You have an isolated network. They don't have any connectivity to the system, and it is a sneaker net scenario where you have to go through an activation process to get the key and sneaker net it in, and then you can either turn on usage or turn off usage in that scenario. So collect usage in the isolated network environment or not, because some scenarios, your isolated network environments, they're not going to allow that usage information to get out anyway. So you have that option of doing it or not. So you're just using the same licensing technology that you would use in your cloud or your SaaS applications, but for your on-premise isolated network scenarios. We do. Yeah. Hence the reason it's there, and we're enhancing it further. I think we're at a point where we have to wrap up because the next sessions are starting. So thank you all, and if any other questions come up, feel free to talk to either one of us.
Thanks, everyone.